which is lithium-ion batteries and associated adapter plates on the pallet that will be retrieved robotically from the outside, and the rest will be cargo on the inside retrieved by the crew. This includes many experiments as well as some hardware, tools, and food. Some of the tools inside include special spacewalking tools that will be used for the alpha magnetic spectrometer repair. That'll be scheduled later in Expedition 61. Those tools specially designed to work with such a delicate piece of hardware. There's also oxygen and nitrogen tanks, some specialized hardware for the water recovery system, as well as the treadmill. Again, in the pressurized compartment of the vehicle, about 5,000 pounds of cargo. Mission Control Houston, following along from the milestones provided by the HTV control and Takasaki Range Control over at the Tanegashima Space Center that are overseeing the launch. Everything still on track for a launch just 3 minutes from now. The International Space Station, passing over the Atlantic Ocean, now crossing over into the continent of Africa, the southern border of the country of Liberia. It's on a northeastern track and will be located over Africa at the time of launch being over at the east at one of the southern islands of Japan. You can see there on this map. Everything's still on track from here in Mission Control Houston and out at the Range Control Center and HTV Control. Less than 2 minutes to launch.
Followed by the pressurization of the liquid oxygen and hydrogen systems of the second station, and they are now complete. Cooling initiates at the flame deflector.
1 minute until launch. Everything looking good so far.
打ち上げ1分前です。T-1 minute.
30 seconds to launch. Again, the solid rocket boosters and that core stage, the first stage containing liquid fuel, will carry the rocket through the first 1 minute 54 seconds of its launch. Everything's still on track, 10 seconds to launch. Getting a good view of the engine underneath, now igniting.
All systems are go. Engine started. We have main engine ignition.
T0 and liftoff of the HTV-8 and the H-2B rocket carrying its way 4 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. Lighting up the night sky over southern Japan. Everything looking good through the flight so far.
Number 8 with Kounotori on board from the JAXA
Those 4 strap-on solid rocket boosters will carry the vehicle through the first 1 minute 54 seconds of the launch.
打ち上げ以降、ロケットの管制は吉野発射管制塔から竹崎総合司令塔に引き継がれています。
Following liftoff, the operation control of the launch vehicle has been switched from the blockhouse to the range control center.
ロケットは現在徐々に南東方向の太平洋上を飛行しています。
Now 1 minute into the flight. "20 more seconds before those solid rocket boosters burn out. Everything looking good so far. The vehicle itself heading towards the southeast to get in the right phasing to meet up with the International Space Station. You can see the solid rocket boosters beginning to burn out. We should see them separate in pairs coming up here in just a few seconds. There's the first pair of solid rocket boosters separating. And the second pair. Now that core stage will continue to burn until 5 minutes 47 seconds into the flight, burning liquid fuel, liquid hydrogen, and liquid oxygen. Good confirmation of booster separation. 2 minutes 47 seconds into the flight, 3 minutes left of this first stage. Three minutes 47 seconds into the flight, everything looking good so far. That first stage will continue to burn for another 2 minutes. Four minutes 47 seconds into the flight, 1 minute left of this stage. Everything continued to be on track throughout the flight of the HTV today and the H-2B rocket, performing nominally. Again, 5 minutes 47 seconds into the flight will be the cutoff of that first stage. It'll enter into a 7-second coast period before the first and second stage separates. Another 7 seconds until the second stage is ignited. Everything continuing to be on track. 5 minutes, 27 seconds into the flight, 20 more seconds of the first stage burning. Switching to animation right after the burnout of that first stage. And confirmation that that first stage did successfully cut off. Second stage burning now. First and second stages separated. This second stage will burn for well over 8 minutes, 8 minutes 19 seconds. It'll be just over 15 minutes until the HTV itself is inserted into a good orbit. Coming up on 7 minutes into the flight, everything looking good so far. Eight minutes into the flight, HTV continuing on a nominal track heading towards the southeast to get into the right phasing to meet up with the International Space Station, which is just about to cross over into an orbital nighttime as it crosses over the Mediterranean Sea towards the western coast of Greece. Meanwhile, the HTV heading on a southeasterly course over the Pacific Ocean to get into a good orbit. Again, it's about 15 minutes from the time of liftoff to the time of orbital insertion, and the HTV separates from the launch vehicle. Ten minutes into the flight, that second stage continuing to burn as expected. Everything on track as the HTV makes its way through its ascent milestones. There are only a few milestones left. That second stage burns for well over 8 minutes total. We're now 10 minutes into the flight. We could expect a cutoff about 14 minutes 20 seconds into the flight. It'll enter into a short coast period. That coast lasting just about 51 seconds before there's physical separation between the HTV and the second stage of the H-2B rocket. 11 minutes, 30 seconds into the flight. HTV-8 and the second stage of the vehicle performing nominally. Less than 3 minutes until the second stage cuts off and the vehicle enters a short coast period. Again, the phasing here gets it into an orbit to catch up with the ultimate destination of HTV-8, the International Space Station, where it will arrive on Saturday morning, capture scheduled for 6:15 a.m. Central Time. The International Space Station itself crossing over into an orbital nighttime now just north of the Black Sea over the southern border of Ukraine. "13 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight, everything looking good so far for that second stage. Expect a cutoff just under a minute from now. Again, after that cutoff, it'll enter into a short coast period before the physical separation between the HTV and the second stage. "14 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. Should expect a cutoff here in just a few seconds. Second stage has cut off, now just waiting for confirmation of physical separation between the HTV and the second stage. And confirmation of separation. Getting a look at HTV control over in Tsukuba, Japan. A good flight of the vehicle. Looking back at the launch pad where the H-2B rocket took off just 15 minutes ago. HTV mission control over in Tsukuba, Japan will take over the flight from here, now that the HTV has separated from the launch vehicle. There's HTV control over in Tsukuba, Japan. Just recently we saw the Launch Control Center, that's the Takasaki Range Control Center over in Tanegashima. This HTV Control Center over in Tsukuba, Japan, just northeast of Tokyo. It'll be these teams here that'll see through the flight of HTV over the next few days to rendezvous at the station early Saturday morning. Now that HTV has physically separated, just waiting for confirmation that the vehicle itself is drawing power in a good configuration after separation. And HTV Mission Control will take over from there. Again, you're looking at the HTV flight control room over in Tsukuba, Japan. These teams will oversee the flight of HTV on its route in low Earth orbit to catch up with the International Space Station. Again, the HTV Mission Control Center over in Tsukuba, Japan. That's just northeast of the major city of Tokyo, the center island.